Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the stream. Hope everyone's doing well today. Just need to do the clicky clacks. Make sure everything is shared as appropriate. Almost there. All right, I think that is it. Excuse me. All right, good morning, Yamashisha, Postmatic, Shadow. Hope you're all doing well. Got my boomer juice. Yes, we got one for tonight. The problem is the chapters suddenly turned very, very long. In fact, I think we'll record Billy Bob today. So the chapters have gone from like 13 minutes to 30 minutes. Which is a big difference. Vocal cords are doing all sorts of weird crap this morning. Chapter 20. Excuse me. Should just double check how long this is. Five, 6. That is lot longer than expected. The hut? Oh. It's not the hut, it's the human. It's the human from the dungeon. Three, 5, 2, 1. All right. Okay. Vingt is 20 in French. $21 is 3521. It's not too bad. $22 is not too bad. 3727, 3727. Vingt, vingt un, vingt deux. And then my phone. Hello? Ah, okay. Just need to forward this to my wife. Expecting a delivery, but they want a pin. Forward. Forward? Forward. Not a problem, Postmatic, not a problem. Vingt durch. And then vingt troi. Tros. Trois. 23. Three, 6, 2, 3. 3, 6, 2, 3. Good morning, Adderworks. Hope you're doing well. So, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. Let's do 24 as well. Let's see where we are. All 635. Okay. Not too bad. We can do up until Sunday. Then tomorrow, Nature Predators. And then Friday, the Human from the Dungeon. Sunday, we can do Billy Bob. Then Monday, TFOS and re-TFOS. Tuesday, more TFOS and re-T. Yeah, we should be fine. Good morning, Huge Dinosaur. Hope you're doing well. Well, sleeping's a good thing sometimes. Yeah, you don't want to get too addicted to sleeping. You need to keep your body guessing. Good morning, Chanel. Hope you're doing well. Just, be careful not to burn yourself out, Dinosaur. It takes a long time to recover from that shit. Yeah, well, maybe your body needed it. Sometimes, that's just the way it happens. Can't keep just going and ignoring sleep for too long. Alrighty. Let's, oh, I do there. Click the wrong button. Okay, I think we'll move on to the first chapter. Staring very intently at my second monitor. That is way too far away. Billy Bob, 20. Alright, on to the working. Greetings, ladies and metal and welcome to this latest edition of re-TFOS, where I take old stories I've narrated and update them to modern audio standards. This particular story is called Billy Bob Space Trucker and is part of a series. If you are new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 20. Since very few species, other than humanity, had the ability to process spatial positioning on the fly, the galaxy had been built up along a standardized axis. Whatever the flat plane that a system's planets rested on would be the plane for that system. Ships would arrange themselves in a two-dimensional flat grid in order to simplify construction, FTL gate positioning, and traffic flow. While humans didn't mind this on most issues, While humans didn't mind this in most issues, they didn't adhere to it completely, because it didn't always work. Most systems that had asteroid belts, for example, had to have special and expensive gravity tethers set up to keep asteroids from wandering into FTL lanes. In Sol, the humans just built gates to flow up and over the belt, and then back down into the standardized plane. They figured the cost of keeping the gates in position was a lot less expensive than the special gravity tethers for the whole stretch of asteroids. They figured the cost of keeping the gates in the whole stretch of asteroids. This general trend for Xenos to behave in a space on a flat plane had another effect, however. It made it easy for the human military to surprise them. Not only did Xenos ignore most deep space because they assumed no one was crazy enough to venture out into the abyss willingly, they failed to scan above or below their standard plane. This is why the U.S. supercarrier group, Freedom Fist, This is why the U.S. supercarrier group Freedom Fist sat above the Crustcan system. Light crews were refueling gladiators. Marines were prepping their gear just in case. Techs were rechecking weapon systems, engines, and every system that could be engines, and every system they could in preparation for battle. Thousands of humans sat in the abyss, waiting for the call, knowing war was nearly upon them. There was a pause as the PA opened up across the fleet. This is Admiral Winters. Crustacans, feck it. We've all seen the pictures. The arsefaces have just begun attacking UHG colonies. The arsefaces. The arsefaces have begun attacking UHG colonies. We're told the casualty lists are already in the tens of thousands. The colonies being targeted are entirely civilian, but these arsefaces wanted to send a message to humanity. They're doing this because of an American is defending a Xeno diplomat. That's what we're dealing with here. A species that's used to being the big bad bully and getting what it wants. Now that they're dealing with an American who refuses to surrender to the tyrannical and diabolical demands in the face of his own suffering, they're hoping to scare him into giving up by holding humans hostage. Our government has received no warning about these actions. We were never asked to make our citizens surrender the diplomat. The UHG has not even been informed of the situation by the Xenos. These arsefaces just took it upon themselves to start killing and kidnapping These arsefaces just took it upon themselves to start killing and kidnapping innocent civvies. Crews around the fleet were growling at the news. All the while bombs were ready, guns were loaded, and shields were checked. Well, we're going to show these ugly feckers that messing with one human means messing with all humans. We all know the policy. America demands revenge by order of magnitude. And these aren't American civvies getting killed, so that means it's twice as bad. So for every one of the UHG civvies that gets killed, I want you bastards to kill at least 100 off of these ugly ass scraps. They want to bully our friends and try to terrorize humanity without declaring war. We'll show them who they are fucking with. There was a cheer across the fleet at the idea. Weapon systems came online. The fighter bombers began to warm up their engines. Marines marched into their assault ships. Elsewhere in the galaxy, calls were going out. The reserves were being called up, and since government service was mandatory for a few years, that meant every able-bodied man and woman in the nation were being called up. Merchant vessels were entering shipyards to get fitted with more weapons. The entirety of the sport racing industry was being retrofitted. The entirety of the sport racing industry was being refitted to become scouts for the Navy. Space truckers were moving to military depots. If you weren't hauling bullets, bombs, or fuel, you were going to be thrown into combat. America was now at war. Naval elements were scrambling to protect the outer colonies. Naval elements were scrambling to protect the outer colonies that were now being attacked by the Crustacans. American intel operatives were moving into Xeno territory. UHG diplomats were being informed of everything America knew about the situation. But while the military began to move to defend, it was the job of the supercarrier group to throw the first punch. Crews around the fleet waited for the end of the transmission. Then they heard Winters pause in a speech. "We are now at war, and it is our honor to deliver the first strike. We are the angel of death, unfurling our wings above our foe. They shall be reduced to nothing more than glass and ashes. Strike hard and strike true. Winters out." The speech ended, and the feed cut out as the fleet began to move. Everyone was secure at their station. Pilots in their fighter bombers, Marines secure in the crash netting, deckhands clear of the flight deck hangar, techs at their terminals. Then the order was given. The fleet jumped. Everyone had the same strange sensation of blackness, with strange nameless colors at the edge of their vision, and soft whispers scratching at their brains. 20 minutes later, the fleet returned to real space, the Crustacan planet just below them. Hydration, yarg. On the planet, consoles were screeching in warning. On the planet, consoles were screeching in warning. They'd been caught entirely unprepared as the fleet engaged. Gladiators streamed out of the carriers, and Marines' armadillos plummeted towards their targets. Assassin-class ship killers blinked into reality near Crustacan ships, their torpedoes firing the moment they had a firing solution. And the carriers' railguns swiveled as they found targets of opportunity. The Crustacans hadn't been in a real war in centuries, and even then, the war against the Libertonians had been almost entirely on the offensive. For the first time in their history, an enemy had suddenly appeared over a major developed world of theirs, with the intent of war. Winters hit the launch order on the bridge, and even as the ships, Marines, and fighter bombers all raced to their targets, the carriers unleashed the first strike. The Liberation-class missiles launched from their firing tubes and rained down upon the planet. In the colony's capital, Crustacans were scurrying around, unsure what to do in this sudden attack. They didn't know how long they had before the enemy arrived. But then they looked up as something gleamed in the sky above them. They had no idea that their city was about to become hotter than the surface of a star. Was about to become hotter than the surface of a star. That their bodies would be turned to ash and swept away as the only evidence they ever existed would simply be a black shadow permanently etched into the stone beneath them. They had no idea that the crew of the Enterprise had written on the side of the missile racing towards them, and especially no idea that it said, "Hey, ass crabs, I'll see you in hell. Sincerely, Billy Bob, Space Trucker." Billy Bob, Space Trucker. You're reading. Up-doot-de-doot. Elsewhere in the galaxy, the new war was waging on in a museum. Billy Bob was cornered by an exosuit corpse. Billy Bob was cornered by exosuit cops. After smashing that force field generator, they'd come running, and since it hurt to punch metal suits, he was swinging one of the signs as a makeshift club. The tourists had run screaming as alarms sounded through the museum, and people started filing out. There was another threat, however, as the Crustacan hunter-killers who'd been waiting at the entrance started to swarm into the place, knocking civilians aside as they pushed through the waves of panicked tourists who were running away from the alarms. The exosuit had some fancy toys on them, as Billy Bob learned when he got shocked by a few who got too close. But he was far hardier than they were expecting. "There's just one of him," shouted a guard as the others stayed just better. There's just one of him," shouted a guard as the others stayed just past their range. as the others just stayed past the range of his swinging sign. Water was leaking out of a few suits that had been cracked pretty hard, but Billy Bob had backed up after knocking them down, letting the others pull their wounded comrades out of the way to patch them up and stop the water loss. Even Billy Bob wasn't too keen on murdering museum guards. "Come on! Come on then, you evil robots! Keep coming at me!" he encouraged, waving on them on. Finally, they charged en masse, swarming over him. He swung the sign to knock 2 back, but 3 were on him. But three more were on him. Stun rods zapping as he grunted and growled, slowly putting the two. Come on. Even Billy Bob. "Come on then, you evil robots, keep coming at me," he encouraged, waving them on. Finally, they charged en masse, swarming over him. He swung the sign to knock 2 back, but 3 more were on him. Stun rods zapping as he grunted and growled, slowly pulled to the ground. The Greslins inside their suits were panting, feeling the strain of cornering and fighting the human for the last few minutes. But as they sat atop him, he just started laughing. "What's so funny, tourist? We got you now," said one of the guards as they worked to hold him down, since his strength was still considerable. "What's so funny? Is this whole time you guys have only been looking at me?" "So?" one of the guards asked Billy Bob. So? Blah blah. Yeah. So? One asked as Billy Bob laughed once more. Then they heard a heavy thud from behind them. The Greslins turned as fear and dread began to grip them. The Livertonian exosuit that was on display, the one that had been released from the security shield after the human destroyed the generator. It was moving. They stared up at the towering machine as it walked towards them. "Please, get off my friend." Emily didn't have to ask twice as they scrambled to get off the human. Billy Bob stood up, dusting himself off with a grin. "Yay! Looks like you're the big strong one now. But forgive me if I pass on letting you carry me before I try to cut your throat. But forgive me if I pass on letting you carry me before I try. But forgive me before. But forgive me if I pass on letting you carry me before I try to cut your throat. Oh, shut up. Come on, let's get that golden record and get out." As they turned around, another squad of Greslins showed up with more gear, stun rods, gas guns, riot shields, and stared up at Emily in her power suit. "Don't even think about it," Billy Bob said, as they dropped their riot control weapons on the ground. He chuckled then and began to walk past Emily, followed along behind her. He chuckled then and began to walk past as Emily followed him along. Behind him. The Greslins quickly rushed to help their comrades once Emily stomped past. The power suit's clawed feet were digging tracks into the stone floors with every step. "This makes me feel amazing. I feel so tall and strong. Also, I really don't know what I'm doing, Billy Bob. I've never used one of these before. There's a bunch of commands I don't understand." "Have you tried saying, 'help'?" There was a pause before her speaker came back on. "How did you know that would work?" "Human, Libertarian, whoever. The military's not always the brightest of the bright. People are going to need to ask for help." They walked into the exhibit that had the Voyager, and he stopped in front of the glass. He waited for a moment and then looked up at Emily. "Emily, the glass?" "Oh, right. Do I just punch it? One of the upper arms moved up and crashed into the glass, which shattered and fell away. Billy Bob quickly moved forward, climbing up onto the Voyager to find the hatch he was looking for. Opening it up, he retrieved the golden record before walking back to Emily. Is there a storage hatch in there? Some place to store this? There was a pause as he stood there, looking up at the suit. Yes, she finally said, and crouched down a little as the compartment opened up along the right side of the power suit. He tucked the record into the compartment, noting it had padding to keep it secure, which was good. Then he nodded at the next display, and she walked up, punching that one as well. He waited for the glass to finish falling before stepping in to pick up the Luger. It only had 2 magazines, but he took them. The MP-44 had 6 magazines, thankfully, which he tucked into his pockets. This was why he loved pockets. You never knew when you were going to need to carry a bunch of ammo, and you couldn't get your tactical. You never knew when you were going to need to carry a bunch of ammo, and you couldn't get to your tactical vest. He turned to the MP-44. He turned the MP-44 over in his hands, inspecting it for a little. He examined the slide, the receiver, pulling it a few times, and then pulled on the trigger. Satisfied, he slapped a magazine into place, loaded it, and aimed at the Nazi pressure suit. It already had a hole in it. What did it matter? What did another matter? He pulled the trigger and smiled as the bullet tore through the head of the pressure suit. Then he looked at the black uniform set up on a mannequin. It looked like it might fit him. Then he shook his head and pulled the iron cross up and off the neck of the uniform, pulling it over his head and tucking it into his shirt. All right, let's go, he said, and looked over at Emily, who had been quite so far. I think I've got a better idea of how this works. I'm ready, but I don't think the Greslins will bother us again. Who? Oh, the fish cops. Yeah, probably not, but you never know. So it pays to be prepared and keep your gun loaded. Even as he said that, they heard the clacking of claws on the stone as the 6 arsefaces rounded the corner, guns raised. But then they paused and looked up at the towering Libertonian power suit. They mean to steal the display, not destroy it. They mean to steal the display, not destroy it, one hissed out in alarm. But before they could attack or call for help, Emily demonstrated what she'd learned. The power suit shot forward, carving lines into the stone as claws dragged through it. The upper arms grabbed 2 of the hunter-killers, shredding them in the midst of green goop and shell. The energy weapons on the lower limbs fired at 2 in the back, and then she jumped, landing and crushing the last 2 beneath those clawed feet. Then the power suit turned and hopped from foot to foot. How? Look at how good I am. This is amazing. Emily was excited, even as she happened to grind the bodies beneath her into mush, staining the metal legs. Billy Bob stood there, mouth hanging open in surprise. After all this time protecting Emily and fighting creatures, he really was a little guy now. He also wasn't ashamed to admit that he was a little aroused at the moment. Then they heard more shouting and clicking of claws. Touchdown dance later. We need to get out of here, he called out, running past. Glancing around the corner, he saw a squad of arsefaces and jumped out, MP-44 firing as they cried in space. MP-44 firing as they cried in surprise. Their energy shields were as useless as the ones the Borks had used. He had just glad the museum had gone through the trouble of perfectly preserving the centuries-old ammunition in its original form. Good morning, Kandaria. Hope you're doing well. The squad was pulped, dead and bleeding, that green gunk all over the white floors as Billy Bob quickly reloaded. Turning, he nodded at Emily, jogging past her power suit as he began to check around corridors. He saw another squad charging down their way, noting one of them had a large tube hoisted over his shoulder. That was an anti-tank gun if he ever saw one. "I got this one, Billy Bob," he heard, and looked up as Emily talked. I got this one, Billy Bob," he heard, and looked up as Emily charged past. "I'm having as good a morning as I can, Candaria. Thank you for asking." "I got this one, Billy Bob," as Emily charged past. "Emily, wait!" he called out, but she was around the corner. Unlike the surprise squad from before, these were aware something big was out there. They raised their weapons, and she rounded the corner, and their targeting computers didn't struggle much getting a firing solution on a target rushing straight at them. Her power suit was pelted with those pink bolts, a blue shield flashing as it absorbed the blows. But then the one holding the tube fired, and a green cylinder slammed into her suit's chest. She staggered, but was upon them, claws flashing as she tore them to shreds. He shook his head as he jogged to catch up. She understood swooping and clawing, but not ranged combat. He knew that thing had to have a targeting computer, but she wasn't thinking like that just yet. But she wasn't thinking like that yet. That hurt, she groaned over the speaker. "Okay, let me give you a quick pointer." Did I have to? And update. Okay, I did update. Yep, later in the week. We're over hump day. Now we're looking forward to the weekend. Okay, let me give you a quick pointer. Don't just run straight at the fecker with the anti-tank gun. But I want you to avoid all of the fire back on the station, and I can move way faster. Yeah, I rolled, duck, dove, and weave. Serpentine! You gotta move around. Straight lines are not hard to predict, especially when you charge straight at them. Betty Bob was shaking his head. Here, wait for a second. They had another corridor before they'd be out in one of the gardens. He glanced around the corner and saw a stationary squad with two of those tubes waiting for them. Dropping down, he pressed his back into the wall, shifting a little to get ready, and quickly leaned around the corner, racing to one knee. Two shots at the first, 2 shots at the second, then back around the corner. Go! Emily charged as the crabs tried to scramble and pick up the tubes, but she was on them too quick. Their standard rifles didn't face the shield in the least. Was that better? Much, Betty Bob said as he jogged out to catch up with Emily. Was that better? Much, Betty Bob said as he jogged out to catch up with her. But they were about to be out of the corridors. He thought over the layout of the museum and he said, All right, outside is the garden section. We can either cut straight across and through more corridors, or fight through the gardens and back up to that private dock. He glanced around the corner and then quickly tucked back. Fuck! There had been a half-dozen squads out there. 3 were out in the gardens, 3 had been up on the bridges and balconies around the area. He had 4 full magazines and his current mostly full one, but with the various ranges and covers, he wasn't sure how many he could get. And that was the squads he could see. No telling if there were more. He laid out the situation for Emily and shook his head. Not sure what to do here. Betty Bob, the wings in the suit aren't for show, you know. He looked back. He looked back up at that. What do you mean? I'll charge, duck and dodge, and weave on all that. You get the ones on the matter. You get the ones with the matter slammers. Is that what you guys call them? Not bad. Then he shrugged. Well, this is as good a way to die as any. Are the speakers on that thing easy to control? Yes. Why? Can you give my implant access? Hold on. He waited a few seconds before she said, Okay, go. Nodding, he scrolled through his implant and smiled as he selected song 2 on repeat. All right, make it good. He took a few breaths, glancing out once more, and then leaned out, firing to get their attention and kill one of the tube holders. They started to train their weapons on him when Emily rushed out of the corridor just in time for the woohoo. Then she leapt, and the small boosters launched the suit forward into a squad which she shredded. He figured no one would focus on him after that. He ran forward, popping off shots at the tube holders when he could. They fired at her, and from time to time got a lock-on with the tubes. But when they shot out, she was dropping away, or jumping in a different direction. She'd seen Billy Bob in action and understood what he meant now. Keep moving, jump, charge, dash. She'd fly up into the air, swoop in and stomp on the ground. She'd fly up into the air, swoop in and stomp on a squad, or charge at them, only to leap to the side and hit a different squad, all while that music blared out through the gardens. Billy Bob grinned as he watched her work, but he got careless. He was standing in the open when he got slammed from the side, 3 of those pink bolts hitting his right side and his shoulder. He gasped and cursed, feeling the sting and seeing the burn marks. He ducked down behind a stone planter. He ducked down behind a stone planter box and rubbed his side with a curse, breathing hard. Breathing hurt. His ribs twinged, and as he shifted his shoulder, he groaned in pain. So he shifted the MP-44 and rose up, firing from the left side to kill the arse crab who shot at him from the balcony. He got up and limped along then, taking a long burst at the last squad to keep their heads down. Then Emily dropped on them as the green gunk flew in every direction. He was down to 2 magazines left, and reloading was a bit more difficult. But no one else was trying to kill them, it seemed. But no one else was trying to kill them, it seemed. The power suit jumped off the balcony it was on, dropping to the gardens with a thud, cracking the stone under its clawed feet. We did it great, Billy Bob, she said as she turned the music off. Yeah, I'm real proud of you, Emily. You kicked ass like a pro. He groaned a little as he looked around the splattered remains of the arse faces. He hurt, and he wasn't sure if he had internal bleeding, but he was a hell of a lot better off than them. Emily didn't notice, and he didn't plan on telling her. Hey, is there some art you want to take with us? But we should get out of here. Why? He waved a hand. They're all dead. I'm positive there are more, she said, and nodded a little. I'm positive there are more, she said, and he nodded a little at that. Yeah, but they don't seem to be rushing to get to us now that we've thinned them out. Do you want to go back and shred those paintings? Do you want to go back and shred those paintings about the war? The power suit turned back the way it come from. I could, couldn't I? Yeah, or we could go pick out a painting you'd really like and take it with us. There was a pause for a moment. Do you remember that painting with the sunset over that mountain, where the double moon was in the top corner? Yeah, with that fart cloud over the trees. It's not a fart cloud, it's actually from my home planet. It's one of the few Libertonian paintings here. I didn't want to mention it earlier in case someone overheard. I want to take that with us. Sure. You go shred the paintings, I'll go meet you. You go shred the paintings. I'll go meet you at that one. Okay, I'll meet you there. The power suit charged off down the way they'd come. Yes, for the doggo. The doggo is actually here today. KO, but still here, snoring happily. I'll meet you there. The power suit charged off down the way they'd come. The power suit charged off the way they'd come. The power suit charged off down the way they'd come from, and once she was out of sight, Billy Bob groaned and began to limp towards the painting she'd mentioned. His side hurt and made him wince, but he could keep moving all right. He got to the gallery, now completely empty, and sat down heavily on a bench near the painting in question. He looked up at the one she had mentioned. It was rather nice. Some sort of valley in front of a mountain, purple-red river weaving between some sort of Purple Red River. Purple Red River, weaving between some short-looking trees with what he called a green fart cloud hanging over them. It was sunset, birds flying through the skies just above the green cloud. In the top corner, just over the mountain, was a double moon and night sky. So, that was Libertonian Earth. Didn't look bad, aside from the fart cloud. Soon the power suit came clomping down the hall. He stood up and waved as she got close. Good pick there, Emily. Like the frame. Good pick there, Emily. Like the frame. Yeah, it looks good. He nodded and slung the MP44 over his shoulder and pulled the painting off the wall. It was a good 6x6 painting, but in the lower gravity, he could carry it just fine. Why don't you sweep around real quick? Why don't you just sweep around real quick and then meet me out in the flower garden? The one with that nice fountain. Make sure no other arsefaces are closing in on us. I'll see you there. Sounds good, she said, turning and rushing off again. Once more, Billy Bob waited until she was out of sight and groaned out. He hauled the painting along, struggling a bit with the large size, even if it didn't weigh very much. Soon he was outside in the gardens and forced himself not to limp as he carried the painting out to the flower garden he had mentioned. Reds, blues, purples of all sorts. Reds, blues, purples, all sorts of different colors were arranged around a fountain of dancing water. Her power suit standing in the open. The place was empty. The place was empty, and it all looked rather gorgeous, even the claw marks her suit left in the stone. He smiled as he approached, wobbling a little in the wind as the painting acted as a big sail. But the wind wasn't that strong in the light garage. But the wind wasn't that strong in the light gravity. Still in the clear? Yeah, I don't see anyone else. This is exhilarating, Billy Bob. I feel so incredibly powerful. This suit is amazing. Yeah, you was something special, stomping and shredding like that. I think I'll let you do all the fighting from now on. I couldn't have survived without you. You kept them down, shot those matter slammers. It was incredible. Let me just, take a moment to rest. All this fighting is a little draining today. I didn't get all amped up like before. Oh, okay. He leaned on the painting against... He leaned the painting against the bench and then sat on a free one. He leaned the painting... Okay. He leaned the painting against the bench. He leaned the painting against a bench and then sat on a free one, looking around at the flowers as they swayed lightly in the breeze. His side really hurt, especially because breathing hurt, but he just smiled up at Emily. I guess you were right. This museum wasn't half bad, now was it? Kind of crazy about the war, though. I wonder what they did to make us attack. Emily was quiet for a moment as he looked up at her. Then she frowned. What do you know? It's us. I told you I was on my way to the capital to destroy the galaxy as we know it. What? You're destroying the galaxy? Sorry. Maybe a translator error. Maybe a translator error. We're going to change it. I have proof the Council has been suppressing the ambition and intelligence of some species with a special device. I wanted to unveil it at the Council meeting and tear the government apart. Oh, when did you say that? I talked about it some just after we first left that refueling station where we first met. Why do you think I was being hunted by hunter-killers? He paused, trying to think back that far. He remembered thinking how awesome it was that she was a space eagle, although now she was a space eagle raptor. Also, to be perfectly honest, he went a little blind after being offered several billion credits. You know, I never really asked. I thought they were bandits or something. Yeah. Are they council race? Are they like cops or something? They are the secret police. Oh, the secret police. Back them then. They're real suppressing races. They're really suppressing races. Yes, through the FTL lanes and translator implants. I feel fine. You're a brand new species. It takes time to figure out how to calibrate the devices to tailor each species and tone down their ambitions and intellect. Keeps them easy to control. This is the sort of thing that we wanted to prevent when we originally formed the council. We just called it basic TV. What? Nothing. He sighed and got up, then unable to suppress a groan that Emily noticed. Wait, are you hurt?
Nah, I'm fine. Don't worry about it, just a scratch.
Billy Bob.
I'll be fine. Let's get to the ship.
He picked up the painting again, but this time Emily wasn't ready to rush off. He limped along with the painting, dragging along his side now as they approached the private dock in the back of the museum. But as they approached, neither one had been paying enough attention. Arsefaces burst from behind the other ships that were still sitting on the ground, and a giant metal crab power suit skittered out from behind his longhorn. Billy Bob quickly dropped the painting and pulled up his MP-44. But they were out in the open, dead to rights with 5 hunter-killers and a metal crab around them.
Surrender! We have you surrounded,
came a voice from the metal crab. Heck, Billy Bob muttered as he looked around, but then the metal crab seemed to shift. He's where? He's where? Came out over the speaker. I'll kill you, human! A voice screeched from behind them. Billy Bob turned and saw an arseface with 2 eyes stitched shut and some scars on his face. Aye, Captain Arseface, we'll have my revenge. Oh, hey, you're that guy from before. Wait, you two have the same name? Wait, you two have the same name, Emily said from beside him. Everyone paused at that, and Billy Bob frowned, quickly undoing some of his translator options. Wait, my name is Bleeblob, not some filthy human name. It's pronounced Billy Bob. Try. It's pronounced Billy Bob, the trucker said. There was an awkward moment as they stared at each other, and then Bleebob screamed, You can't have my name! Die! Die! Rushing forward, he began to fire wildly. His targeting computer, unable to lock onto a target as he ran forward, and his 2 eyes struggled to figure out its depth. The arsefaces scattered back behind their ships as Emily dashed to the side, and Billy Bob ran to the other way. Billy Bob ran the other way, diving behind a ship as well. An arseface was behind it, and Billy Bob cursed before putting up his MP-44 and blasting it quickly. Groaning, he pushed himself to his feet, trying to run around the ship, only to run into another hunter-killer. Up close, it dropped the energy rifle and tried to snap his face off with those claws, but Billy Bob jumped back and then swung his MP-44 to smash it in the face. As it dropped, he fired wildly at the 3rd hunter-killer behind one ship over. As it dropped, he fired wildly at the 3rd hunter-killer behind one ship over. Then he was knocked to the ground as Captain Arseface rounded the corner and slammed him down. The MP-44 went flying, and Billy Bob looked up at the pissed-off Arseface above him. It snapped down with its claws as he twisted and turned to avoid the strikes. Emily was having some sort of close combat brawl with the metal crab. He could hear the sounds of smashing metal on metal, so he didn't think that she could help. He pulled the Luger free from his belt. He pulled the Luger free with his left hand, since his right really hurt for some reason, and cried out as Captain Arseface finally got his right and stepped on him. And cried out. And cried out as Captain Arseface finally got it right and stepped on him. A sharp appendage piercing through Billy Bob's stomach as he gasped and grunted. I've got you now, it hissed, just before Billy Bob pulled the trigger on his Luger and blew the neat hole through Captain Arseface's face. The Xeno collapsed on top of him, knocking his Luger aside as he groaned. Tilting his head, he could see the world upside down as the metal crab had pinned Emily to... As the metal crab had pinned Emily in a power suit. You could see large pincers in the air, moving down, slowly pushing back the arms of her suit. Billy Bob groaned and rolled over a bit, still pinned to the ground by that sharp leg piercing his gut. He reached with his left hand, since his right still hurt, and then grabbed his Luger. Things were blurry, but he aimed at the metal crab and fired everything he had left in the gun. Ping, 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 plunk, plunk, plunk. The crab sagged The crab. The plant. The crab sagged, goop leaking out of 3 holes that had been shot in the side. Emily shoved her off, and then her power suit rose up. Billy Bob was breathing hard. Everything was pretty blurry. She quickly moved over, tossing the body off of him, pulling the leg out of his stomach as he groaned in pain. Then he slowly pushed down with his left hand. Then he slowly pushed down with his left and stood up. Then he slowly pushed down with his left and stood up. He was wobbly, but he was standing.
All right, we won. Feck these guys. High five.
He shifted his right arm up, while holstering the Luger with his left, hoping that she'd be gentle in her power suit. Billy Bob!
What?
He frowned, and then as he slowly looked over, eyes wandering down to his right shoulder, to his left elbow, and he wiggled his elbow, looking around for the rest of his arm.
Oh, shit. Oh, feck Jesus.
He walked past and found his right forearm, where it had been knocked down. That's why it had hurt so much. He walked over, stumbling a bit, as he kicked his forearm.
Shit.
He stumbled a bit more, before managing to pick it up with his left hand. Billy Bob, stay there. I'll go get the biogel. There was a hiss as she opened her power suit and climbed out, but he was staring at his hand being held by his other hand. But he was staring at his hand being held in his other hand. He felt tired. Turning, he sat down on the corpse of the arm. Turning, he sat down on the corpse of Captain Arseface. His eyes were heavy. He heard Emily screaming something about being there in a hurry.
Don't worry. I hope your painting is okay. I'm just going to take a nap.
His breathing slowed as he blinked heavily, still holding his right hand with his left. His eyes closed. And so ends another chapter in the adventures of Billy Bob, Space Trucker. Dun dun dun, cliffhanger. For some reason, the
Dark mode app has changed the colors slightly.
I shall be back momentarily. I leave you with music and chair. And back. Oh. Bumping everything. Just adjusting the dug so that we're all comfortable, or as comfortable as can be. What? What? No. You've been overly clingy today, dog. Okay, there we go. Are we good? We're good. You need breath mint. Yes, you do. Alrighty.
Let's move on to the next chapter.
21. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. Nope. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Read TVOS, where I take old stories I've narrated and update them to modern audio standards. Monster is fighting back. This particular story is called Billy Bob's Space Trucker and is part of a series. If you are new to this series, if you are new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 21. Matriarch Elizabeth was so far beyond furious that she had circled back around to being perfectly calm. She stood before the cast leaders, who were still alive in her command, staring them down as none dare meet her gaze. The operation against the humans had not gone well. At first, things seemed to be in order. Their ships had met minimal resistance, and the colonists were bombed and captured relatively easily, albeit with more difficulty than most species. Then the Americans struck back, and their core system Verneth had been utterly annihilated. They were still going over the reports, trying to figure out how the Americans had managed to get a fleet so deep into their territory without anyone knowing. They glassed most of the cities and sent ground troops to take R&D facilities scattered over the planet. Once they'd taken all they could, they'd destroyed the facilities as they left the planet. In the wake of their destruction, they had also left recordings from the American leader. He simply stated that if the Crustcans continued to attack civilian targets, Americans would continue to attack civilian targets. The hunter-killer teams had managed to kill or capture about 20,000 human colonists, mostly thanks to seizing a colony transport en route to an outlying agri-world. Meanwhile, when the humans struck Verneth? Meanwhile, when the humans struck Vyrnath, they'd killed around 500 million, including the hunter-killers in orbit. The matriarchs are furious at having terms dictated to them in such a fashion, but if they didn't agree, the Americans would wipe them out before they could prepare an actual defense. They left behind a number of the captured colonists to return the message that civilian targets would be left alone. But this wasn't the worst of it. Indeed, after they pulled back with about 5,000 captives, other teams had moved into the Libertonian colony, and while they brushed aside their initial orbital defense and landed on the planet, another human fleet showed up, landing massive numbers of ground troops which completely halted the first Crustcan invasion. The reports from the field were very disturbing indeed. These humans couldn't fly on their own like Libertonians, but some of their number had something called jetpacks, which let them fly just as well. Then there were reports of humans who had some sort of adaptive skin that could change colors. How else could they explain why a team of hunter-killers would score? How else could they explain why the team of hunter-killers would scour an area before advancing, only to be picked off with a long-range ballistic weapon from an enemy from an area they found no humans in just minutes ago? The energy shields that had been standard use in the galaxy for centuries were proving useless against these sorts of weapons. Thankfully, the humans didn't have the tech to employ such shields, and it appeared for now that they lacked biogel. But how long this would last, the matriarch didn't know. The main reason she stared down at her surviving caste leaders had nothing to do with the ongoing invasion and war, however. It had everything to do with the Pulvian Museum and the planets beneath her ship. It had everything to do with the Pulvian Museum on the planet beneath her ship. How is it that two individuals killed so many of your teams? Two. Matriarch, they stole the Libertonian power suit, and we had matter slammers. It should have been down. It should have gone down in a few hits. Well, the caste leaders fell quiet. No one knew the answers, really. By all rights, they should have killed the two terrorists easily. But instead, they'd lost almost all their squads they sent. There were more than two. 5 more showed up. One ventured as the matriarch hissed and approached the caste leader. After we had cornered the 2 injured ones. And how is it those 5 showed up? There were no reports of human ships in the area. Where did they come from? They didn't just, she gestured with her claws, fall out of the sky now, did they? The caste leaders were quiet as she paced back and forth in front of them, hissing and chittering. Her hydrating mucus had been yellow for a full sleep cycle, which indicated how dangerous she was right now. Finally, she calmed down enough to continue. That ship has not left orbit. That infernal blinding cylinder they had kept me from tearing. That infernal blinding cylinder they had kept me from tearing them into pieces when I arrived. But that infernal blinding cylinder they had kept me from tearing them to pieces when I arrived. But I know I saw it fly out towards the wilderness. There were 5 of some sort of black exoskeleton-like species, a Libertonian and 1 injured human. 7 terrorists alone and stranded on this planet without support. You will find them. Her limbs twitched in anger as she thought about how close she had been to ripping them apart before they'd stunned her with those bright flashes. Matriarch, about the human captives we're transporting here. Matriarch, about the human captives we're transporting here. We'll use them as bait to lure the others out. She waved a claw dismissively, but then turned to the one who'd mentioned it. Did you acquire pictures of them? The young caste leader handed her a data slate as she looked at it in curiosity. They come in different colors. How interesting. Does that change the flavor? The young caste leader wasn't aware of the matriarch's particular diet. The taste? I don't. Never mind. I'll take that one. And this one. I'll take that one and this one. Have them delivered to my hunting grounds, she said, tapping on the picture. Strip them first. I don't want to be picking fibers out of my teeth. Then the young caste leader made a great mistake. Your hunting grounds, but matriarch, these are prisoners of war. Besides strict council laws, the Americans were very specific. He didn't get any further as she hissed and charged him, her 4 claws piercing his body as she bit his head off in a single bite, spitting it out and then tossing the body into a wall, leaving the cracked shell to be picked over by the juveniles. She hissed out as the caste leader shifted and skittered away from her. When you find the injured human, you will bring him to me as well.
I swear that I'll feast upon this
Billy Bob, Space Trucker. Billy Bob, Space Trucker.
There was a groan as he slowly opened his eyes, and he saw some big black bug standing over him. He jerked in surprise. Then, before he could try and attack, or anything else, the figure raised its hands.
Whoa, settle down there, I'm human.
Billy Bob relaxed as he tried to figure out where he was. It took him a few seconds before realizing that he was in a bed in his cabin. Mittens was sitting on the counter at the back of the ship, staring at him. But it looked like it was just him and the
fuck are you?
Billy Bob finally said, still feeling woozy and lightheaded.
Archangel.
Oh, holy shit. I didn't think I rated that high. Maybe some jarheads and a cruise missile or two.
No, the bigwigs decided that you're worth a lot more than that.
Billy Bob groaned a little as he shifted in his bed and then paused, tossing the sheets down from his upper body as he pulled his right arm up to reveal his arm. He turned it over slowly, opening and closing his hand as he did. Then he frowned a little.
You look disappointed. It's kind of hoping to find a robot arm. Harder, faster, stronger, and all that.
The figure chuckled. Never found someone disappointed to get their own arm back after losing it. Besides, we're on your ship. Unless you've got a fully stocked medical suite and some spare robot arms around.
Fair enough. How?
That purple gunk your friend had. She used all of it on you. So don't lose your arm again, because there isn't any more. What is that stuff anyway? I've never seen someone heal up so fast.
You'd have to ask Dr. Goldsmith. He gave it to me.
Ah, a doctor gave it to you. No wonder I couldn't read the writing on the side. It was such a bad scribble, my translator tried reading it.
He's not human. He's one of those space goblins.
What? A Xeno named Goldsmith?
Yeah, that's what I said. You... But you met Emily, right?
Yeah, but I thought that was a fluke.
No, apparently more Xenos have novel names than we thought. Speaking of, what's yours?
The figure reached up then, tugging at the back helmet and pulling it away to reveal a woman with dark skin and a shaped head. Khaleesi Johnson, medic and demo expert.
Khaleesi? God, I haven't heard of anyone with that name in ages.
Yeah, it's old-fashioned, but I was named after my great-grandmother.
Doot-de-doot.
Billy Bob shrugged at that.
It's kind of ironic, but that sounds like more of a Xeno name than Emily.
The woman smirked at that and then turned as some entered the cabin. The woman smirked at that and then turned as someone entered the cabin through the airlock. He didn't hear the engines, so they had to be on a planet somewhere. There were two more of those black armored figures, which he now recognized as the new Special Forces power suits. They were far cry from the beast Emily had been driving, piloting, but it was good to see humans who started to catch up on tech. How's he doing, Kel? Good enough to fuck... How's he doing, Kel? Good enough to feck your mother?
Good enough to feck your mother,
Billy Bob quickly shouted, and laughed before groaning and clutching his ribs.
Worth it.
The assembled archangels chuckled at his outburst. Seriously though, sir, he's in remarkable shape for someone who had his arm cut off, and a puncture through his gut, not to mention those energy bolts. Not to mention those energy bolt hits, and general abrasions from being knocked around.
Jesus Christ, I got the shit kicked out of me, and we get it.
They chuckled again. Whatever is in that purple gunk, it's amazing. If we could get our hands on it. The Archangel, who hadn't spoken yet, chipped in.
Feck, if we could copy the power suit, I'd be happy. That thing is great.
Don't forget, they're our allies now. I'm sure they'll share. Billy Bob smiled at that.
No shit. America's first non-human allies.
The apparent officer nodded at that. What do you know of what's been going on?
Two things, Billy Bob said with a smile. Jack and shit.
You aren't what I expected from a pilot, Cal said.
Yeah, well, I wasn't some Ponzi snob on a regular freighter. Yeah, well, I wasn't some Ponzi snob on a regular fighter. I piloted a gladiator. Totally different animal.
So it would seem, the officer spoke up. Well, you've managed to start an intergalactic war. The crabs started hitting UHG colonies. We think they wanted to hold a number of civilians hostage and make you surrender your friend.
Ah, so that's why they hit the planet. So that's why we hit their planet. Was that a rescue mission?
No, that was us making it clear that we won't tolerate further attacks on civilians. Current estimates have it at 5,000 captured and around 12,000 dead.
Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ, it's that bad. Crap. I had no idea they wanted to stop us that bad. Feck. I didn't even know those arse-faced crabs were cops till they ambushed us at the museum and Emily told me. Also, how long ago was that?
2 days. You've been out for a while, Carl said.
Where are we?
We're on the same planet. Their AA is covering everything. We're working on extraction right now. Good thing is, for an old, well-developed planet, they've still got a lot of wilderness.
Billy Bob nodded at that. Xenos don't seem to care much for the frontier spirit, do they? Speaking of Xenos, how's Emily?
She's fine. We've been teaching her about the benefits of camping, the leader said as the other two chuckled.
Billy Bob pushed himself up with a groan. His arm felt incredibly sore, but seeing it as it had been cut off, he'd take incredibly sore.
Whoa there, Carl said as he tried to stand up. You've been out for 2 days. Take it easy there.
Billy Bob was feeling the heat a little, but he just growled out, I'd like to see you stop me. Then he paused and looked up, remembering he was talking to an archangel in power armor that could likely kick his ass even without her. That could likely kick his ass even without the power suit. That could likely kick his ass even without it in a... That could likely kick his ass even without it on her worst day and his best. That could... Good day, Paladin. Hope you're doing well. Remembering his... That could likely kick his ass even without it, on a worst day and on his best. That could likely kick his ass even without it, on a worst day and his best. On second thought, please don't try stop me. Carl laughed at that and held out a giant black armored hand as he steadied himself on it. Then he looked back at his bed and thought for a moment. Wait, if I was out for 2 days, how did...
You didn't have to go, thank God. Your friend said that it was a side effect of the purple gun.
Thank God, he murmured. He was wearing his standard olive drab... He was wearing his standard olive drab green boxer briefs and a plain white tee. He was positive the archangels... He was positive the archangels all had the same undies, or at least the male ones. Everyone stole their GI boxer briefs after their service was up. They were actually high quality, super stain and smell resistant, and for once they weren't made by the lowest bidder. Overall, despite his space age undies, he smelled like a guy who hadn't showered in 2 days. But it could be worse. I'll just take a shower, right? They each shook their head. Wait, why not? We're out in the wilderness, remember? Conserve water, just in case. The officer said as Billy Bob groaned. Now he sounds like a pilot, Carl said, and they laughed. Even Billy Bob smiled. Then he nodded at the officer and the other. And who are my rescuers anyway? Ah, I'm Captain Crunch, yes. Like the cereal guy. Billy Bob had opened his mouth and then quickly shut it. This is Sergeant Sampson. You met Sergeant Johnson outside we have... This is Sergeant Sampson. You met Sergeant Johnson. Outside we have Sergeants White and Ivanich. He's his Luna. Outside we have Sergeants White and Ivanich. Ivanovich. Ivanovich. Good night, Paladin. Thank you for hopping past. Much appreciated. You met Sergeant John. You met Sergeant Johnson. Outside we have Sergeants White and Ivanovich. You met Sergeant Johnson. Outside we have Sergeants White and Ivanovich. He's a loner from Spetsnaz. What's the point of having a squad of sergeants? That's the lowest rank possible we'll accept into the Archangels. Billy Bob nodded. Well, all right then. Just makes me glad I'm not in the military still. He paused then, as the three looked at him, and his brain started to catch up. Except, war was declared, and I'm guessing all reserves were called. Feck! Welcome back, Lieutenant. God damn it! And I'm immediately outranked by a captain. Isn't military chain of command wonderful? Billy Bob groaned. And then a light bulb went off in his head. Wait a minute. I'm valuable. He couldn't see the reaction. He couldn't see the reaction of the two with their helmets on, but Cal was arcing her brows. I want an immediate promotion, and if I'm going to be important enough to warrant all this attention, I'm important enough to get promoted. You've got to be joking, Sergeant Sampson commented. The hell I am. I might as well milk this, because I'm guessing you guys are here more for Emily than me. I'm guessing she's important enough to pull the strings diplomatically to ensure that I get the promotion. He wasn't wrong, and they all knew it. That, as it may be, Lieutenant, Captain Crunch stressed, none of that will happen until we're off this planet. Feck, Billy Bob muttered, since he knew that was also accurate. Well, what are the chances that you guys are heading back to the museum on your way home? Well, what are the chances you guys are headed back to the museum on your own? None. To less than none. It's crawling with crabs. Why would we want to go anyway? Why would we want to go anyway? Why would we want to anyway? Good morning, Alpha Noob. Hope you're doing well. They've got the Voyager in there. There was a pause before the captain spoke up, as in the Voyager, the first man-made object to leave the solar system. Yes, that one. Tempting. We couldn't get it out with a crew this small, but you might be able to destroy the Nazi rocket that they have in there. They say that it was the first cross to leave our orbit. No fecking way, Sergeant Sampson said in the same time as Cull said. The fecking Nazis. Seriously? Where do you guys think I got the snazzy MP-44 in Luger, huh? The captain began and stopped. For some reason that did not occur to me. And where's my Iron Cross, huh? He turned and looked at Cull, who glanced around for a moment. Iron Cross? I didn't see an Iron Cross. Billy Bob glared at her until she sighed. I stored it in a box in the cargo hold. Ha! Sergeant Johnson, taking personal effects from a wounded officer. That's grounds for punishment. Yeah, it is, Billy Bob said with a grin. Do you want to press your charges, Lieutenant? Do you want to press charges, Lieutenant? You're damn straight. Wait a minute. What are we talking about? He asked and looked back at the captain. Court-martial. Oh, no, never mind. I was thinking of something very different. They all stared at him. What? It's been a while, and I nearly died the other day. So you haven't, the captain said, and sort of left it hanging as Billy Bob frowned as he tried to determine what he meant. Then his eyes widened. What? With Emily? They're all nodded. Then his eyes widened. What? With Emily? They all nodded. No, she's a diplomat and a Zeno. I've never, Like what? Like ever? Asked Cole. Not with a Zedo. Why not? You some kind of prude? Asked Sampson. No, it's just back in high school they showed us these projections. The captain stopped him there. No, you stop right there. Our generation swore to never mention those. Ever. Ever. Sorry. But they were asking. Carl looked incredibly confused, and Sampson liked he was under his helmet. And Sampson liked he was under his helmet. Didn't you hear that those were all fake? To scare us away from that sort of thing. Yeah, but how long before you risked it? The captain was quiet for a moment. Fair point. But no, nothing like that exists. Why were you asking? Why were you guys asking anyway? Billy Bob asked as he glanced around. The way she talks about you, Carl said, as the others nodded.
She mentioned we needed to be careful of your sensitive neck. Billy Bob frowned at that, tilting his head a little as he wondered what she meant before realization crossed his face. Oh, you got to be fucking kidding me. Oh, are you fucking kidding me? You know how if we like someone we might give them a hickey? Oh, are you fucking kidding me? You know how if we like someone we might give them a hickey? They bite each other's throats. She tore my carotid. I nearly bled to death, and all she did was give me their version of a hickey. The others remained quiet for a moment as that sank in, before Billy Bob continued. And I learned that all from her hands and I learned that all of her hands end in razor-sharp talons. You guys like it when your partner scratches your back? She'd rip my flesh off my bone. Yeah. How's that for dating a Xeno? Plus, I don't even know if her, plumbing is similar to ours. After all, she's a space eagle raptor. As he said that, they all let out a sound of someone who'd just heard something that clicked. That's what they are. That's what they are. We were just calling them birds. Space eagle raptors. See, when we heard about the claws and saw the pointed... See, when we heard about the claws and saw the pointed beak space eagle, didn't sound right. See, when we heard about the claws and saw the pointed beak, space eagles didn't sound right, Sergeant Sampson was saying. Totally agree with you, Billy Bob. Space eagle raptor, Cal said as she nodded before Billy Bob spoke again. Right, well, you're all talking about me doing that with a space eagle raptor. I like Emily a lot, more than any Xeno ever by far, and better than most humans. But that shit might actually kill me, literally. I don't know if I like her enough to risk dying for, like that. In fact, if I would try... I'd take a bullet for her, but like, I don't know. The captain stood forward, looking down at Billy Bob. Well, Lieutenant, you want that promotion, right? This is how you get it. The fate of humanity's first Xeno alliance, and an incredibly important alliance at that. Now, that's... The fate of... The fate of humanity's first Xeno alliance, and an incredibly important alliance at that, now that sparked an intergalactic war, rests on you keeping the diplomat happy. So you do your country proud, and you make sure that Zito is happy. Billy Bob winced a little. But the captain stuck a finger in Billy Bob's chest. No, you know I'm right. I don't have to be now. You know I'm right. It doesn't have to be now. But you better figure out how to repay her feelings. Now, get out there and let her know that you're all right. Billy Bob sighed and nodded, slowly limping out of the airlock. Once he was gone, Cal spoke up. I really don't think our alliance is reliant on them doing it, sir. And I'm fairly sure that she'd understand if he was hesitant. Oh, I'm sure you're right on both counts. She's very nice. But if he thinks he's getting a promotion without working for it, then he's wrong. Now then, let's go figure out how to get those star-crossed lovers off this planet. The Archangel chuckled and walked out of the airlock, leaving Mittens alone in the cabin. The cat quickly took its chance, jumping from the counter to the nice warm bed. The one who normally fed him had been hogging for so long. He curled up happily on the warm bunk and began to purr. And so ends another chapter in the adventures of Billy Bob, Space Trucker.
It's a grumpy dog. Wing Doix, Wing Trois, Quatre. Nope. Definitely not going to get that far. No, I think you forgot the extra super duper with sprinkles on top. Whenever I see a seagull, I think of Finding Nemo. Marine? Or was that pelicans? Can't remember. I think that was seagulls. Pelicans are also monsters. Those things are psychotic. Main. Prairie gulls. Well, I mean, in Johannesburg, we had seagulls. In the rubbish dumps, what do you call them in America? I don't know. Rubbish dumps, the landfills. And Johannesburg is 700 kilometers away from the closest ocean. Go, puppy. You got gunk in your eyes. Oh, my goodness, yawn. Booby juice, stat. Boomer juice. Interesting. Although, I suppose swans know no boundaries, and those things are vicious as well. Swans. Super aggressive. I almost read that as a Terminator swan. And if the Terminator had been a swan, it would have been a very short franchise. Interesting. For the swan. The swan would just destroy everything. Skynet would win. That's awesome, Buzzmatty. I love that sort of crap. I remember when I worked in corporation, shall we say, the corporate environment. I used to smoke quite regularly, a lot, super a lot. But the smoking area was outside on a veranda, looking down on a koi pond. So I'd stand there and have a cigarette and watch the koi. And then one day, there was a duck in the middle of this koi pond. And I told, my coworkers, there's a duck outside. And they were all like, there's no ducks around here. There can't be a duck in the koi pond. For weeks, I would tell them. And then by the time anybody else went out there, the duck fucked off. Until eventually somebody else saw it. And I was like, there's a duck. I'm like, yes, I know. Damn it. It's been taunting me. And then after that, for years, every year we would see it. Just a singular duck in the koi pond. Well, I don't think these koi were that interested. They got fed every day. Hand-fed. They were fat flecks. Lazy as shit. Which I suppose. They're supposed to look pretty. And that's their job. They don't have to hunt for food or anything. Snorty snort. Got a little lumberjack on our hands. Well done, chat. We've had 100 messages. Congratulations. Yippee! Thank you, Robot, for reminding us.
It is very much appreciated by Overlord.
Look, duck's a nice meat to have. In certain meals. We used to get the... what was it? It was a Chinese restaurant called The Taste of Asia. And they had crispy duck. That was nice. Very nice. Interesting. And orcas are not whales, they're dolphins. I don't know. Chinese food is like China. Oh, I mean, I'd imagine it's similar to most Chinese food. You know, you got your sweet and sours, your kung fu. The chain restaurant in South Africa is called Kung Fu Kitchen. It's the biggest brand or chain. And you got, you know, the usual stuff. My favorite dish from Kung Fu Kitchen was an assorted chow fan. So chow fan was fried rice, and then assorted was just a little bit of everything. So you had chicken, pork, beef, prawn. So it was a veritable lucky packet of fried food. It was very nice. Not healthy, but nice. Most of the Chinese restaurants in South Africa, they don't do pork buns. I'm sorry, am I keeping you up? Do you want some beverages? You're not getting beverages. Yes, yes. Well, I mean, Korean food, they're all slightly different. Kung Fu Kitchen is to Chinese food what Pizza Hut is to Italian food. And yes, I do know the pizzas were invented mostly by Americans. The modern pizza. Anyways, let's head on to the next one. Billy Bob 22? Ving X Du. Deuce. Dukes. Dex. Quack, quack. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Slate's narration of the web series. Nope. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Slate's edition of Read Fast, where I take old stories I've narrated and update them to modern audio standards. This particular story is called Billy Bob's Space Trucker and is part of a series. If you are new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Convocation Commander Conroy had been proud member of a small military the Libertonian still had for most of his life. He fought pirates, he performed black ops missions, and he'd even battled hunter-killer raids. He was proud to serve, and he knew the war would one day return to the Libertonians. What he hadn't expected was that they'd have help when the war finally began again. And he'd especially never expected their help to be so, how did he describe them? Loud, boisterous, utterly insane. Those all fit. So he supposed he'd just have to call them what they were. Americans. Libertonians had been outnumbered in the last war, but this time they were also limited from centuries of being forced to keep their military incredibly small. Of course, they'd built up a way... Of course, they'd built up what they could in secret, but they hadn't been able to start production of their power suits until war was officially declared. The average Libertonian could fly and had razor-sharp claws, but the Crusticans had hard shells and their own claws. Bastions, landmasses, were mostly mountains and valleys, which were perfect for Libertonians and made it harder for Crusticans to advance. But their invasion force outnumbered the actual Libertonian soldiers, 200 to 1. With militia forces that dropped to around 120 to 1, but it wasn't looking good. Then, the Americans showed up with a large fleet to even things out a bit. Their ground forces had been easily deployed around the Libertonian mountain cities for defense, but they needed to counter the Crusticans spreading out around the planet, looking to cut them off in the mines, farms, and smaller towns in the valleys. Considering their small numbers, the Libertonians had been spread out amongst human forces to act as guides and coordinate with militia. Before meeting the Americans, Conroy had thought militia forces were chaotic and unorganized. But then he'd been assigned to the 32nd Stormtroopers. They didn't have power armor, but they did have explosives strapped to their backs. He'd been told that they were called jetpacks. A Libertonian could fly through the skies gracefully, swooping down on target, and then rising away before they were touched. Humans seemed to have a different idea of how this would work. I'm telling you, Commander, that we can stomp down on those crabs and fact their crap up. I don't get why you don't want to just fly over them. I don't get why you just want to fly over them. It still stunned Conroy that he wasn't talking to some tight-winged recruit, but a human officer.
Captain Garcia, that is a forward base, not a simple outpost. There has to be 300 Crusticans in there, and at least 50 in armor. What are you proposing is that me and my 2 soldiers and your 50 take on a full base of trained and experienced hunter-killers, without any air support or artillery. Conroy, we've got jetpacks, and you've got power suits that fly. We are the air support. They're preparing AI, but it isn't operational yet. This is our chance to get in there before they're This is our chance to get in there before they're properly secured. You forget they have 2 AA guns operational already. Yeah, but there are 2 recon teams in position and ready to snipe the crabs out of the gunner seats before they're But there are two recon teams in position and ready to snipe the crabs out of the gunner seat before we're in range. Conroy and Captain Garcia were standing on the edge of a mountain plateau, with the valley stretching out before them. The Crustican base was situated on a wide open plain where they were starting to set up landing pads. It was a typical Crustican design. High walls in a circle with roofing over all but the very center. They had 6 tours arranged around towers. They had 6 tours arranged around the base as well, with AA guns being set up. He looked along the plains, which had nothing but some flowers and grass in them, and shook his head. You must be mistaken, Captain. There isn't anything but the Crustican base down there in the valley. Sure there is. See that group of red flowers? Right there, next to the little pond? Yes. What about them? Captain Garcia spoke into his collar. Pothead Actual, this is Centurion Actual. Do you copy? There was a pause for a moment. No, I don't care that you hate your call sign. There was a pause for a moment. No, I don't care that you hate your call sign, Pothead. Deal with it. Anyway, our bird friend doesn't think you exist. Move about 5 feet to the left. How do you copy? As Conroy watched the red flowers wiggle and shifted as little as he gasped. Yeah, thanks, Pothead Actual. Over. How did your soldiers get so close to their base? We've been up here for hours. Haven't seen them in this entire time. Yeah, neither of the crabs. So come on. Conroy shrugged at that. Very well. I suppose I'll just have to see what you Americans can do. He walked back to his power suit and the 2 veterans he still had with him. When he started to climb up into his suit, he looked back at the humans and was confused. They wore those dangerously volatile jetpacks and had They wore those dangerously volatile jetpacks and had armor along their heads and torsos arranged in olive drab green plates that overlapped. He heard that they had power suits, but they were still rare and made only in very small numbers. Their shields were also worse than the models the Libertonian militia used, so as far as he could tell, their main defense would be speed. So why were they picking up rocks? Once Conroy had climbed into his suit and armor was sealed around him, powering up, he spoke over the speaker. Why are you and your soldiers picking up rocks? This gravity is really light compared to what we are used to. We don't fall enough on our own, so we need these, Conroy gasped out as he looked at them, all picking up giant rocks from the plateau. You can't be serious. Be serious. Sure we are. Want a race? What? Conroy blurted out as the humans turned and then shot into the sky. All 50 of them had giant rocks in their hands as they raced out over the valley. Conroy cursed and quickly jumped his power suit off the edge and activated his thrusters to catch up. He kept expecting the AA guns to start firing, but the crabs on those towers got knocked off somehow. They're recon teams. He still didn't understand how they'd killed the Crusticans, but his mind was on the battle ahead. The humans dropped out of the sky, and he expected them to let go of those rocks, but instead they kept holding them, dropping into the small open circle at the center of the base. When he dropped down, they had already started to attack, and to his shock, they were throwing the rocks at the Crusticans.
They were ballistic weapons, but some didn't unholster them yet. They had ballistic weapons, but some didn't unholster them yet. All around him, the humans were smashing the hunter-killers with rocks, as if they were pre-industrial barbarians. I bet I can kill more of them than you. I bet I can kill more of them with a rock than you, he heard a human say to another. But then the hunter-killers overcame their initial shock and began to fight back. That's when the humans finally pulled out their guns and the battle cry rose up. For liberty, freedom, and Billy Bob, Space Trucker. Billy. Billy Bob was standing out in the Pulvian forest, his ship in the small clearing behind him. It didn't smell like the redwood forest like he remembered as a kid, but overall it smelled pretty foresty. Brown trunks, green leaves, something that resembled acorns but the size of his head. Not bad. The 3 archangels he'd been talking to walked out of his ship as he looked around. Their little campsite, no campfire obviously, but they'd set up black hammocks between trees, and he could see what looked like hunter's blind. And he could see what looked like a hunter's blind in the treetops. It made him think back at camping with his family, and he smiled. Then he heard Emily call out, "Billy Bob!" He looked around and got taken by surprise as she dropped out of the trees in front of him. He kept forgetting that she could fly. She leaned in and gave him a hug, but it was his turn to gasp and groan before she pulled back and looked him down. Greetings, lady. But it was his turn to gasp and groan before she pulled back and looked down at him. "Oh, you're still hurt?" "Yeah, I did get my ass kicked pretty hard at the museum." What would ass pain have to do with it? What would ass pain have to do with any of that? She sounded confused before shaking her head. "Human expression, never mind. I get it." "Yeah. How are you, though? Have these humans been treating you all right?" "Oh, of course. I was so worried when we wouldn't make it back to the museum. When they showed up, I can't tell you how relieved I was. And they've been teaching me how to hunt from the ground. It's a very strange concept. I want to fly and swoop down, but they tell me not to break the tree line." "What were you doing up there in the treetops, then?" "I can't fly, but I can still get up there and scout." How have you been since the museum, anyway? You did good. Did you have combat experience?" "No, but I've hunted." "See? I just could never do that." Emily paused at that and "No."
I could just never do that." Emily paused at that, and Billy Bob looked over at the others. "Any of you know what I mean? Getting someone 'cause they're trying to kill you is pretty easy. It's just like, well, feck, if it's me or you. It's just like, feck, if it's me or you, I like me way better. But animals, I just never got the feel for it. Don't get me wrong, all respect to hunters, I just guess I'm a wussy." The archangels had stepped forward. Cal was still the only one who had taken her helmet off. "No, I get what you mean." The other two looked at her when Captain Crunch spoke up. "Really? I thought you'd been hunting. I thought you've been hunting."
"No, but I do go fishing."
"See, feck fish. I don't give a crap about fish. I don't mind killing them," Billy Bob said, as Emily stood next to him, seeming confused. "But in general, it's kind of weird for me to kill something minding its own business."
"Except fish?"
Emily asked. "Yeah, I don't know. Go fly fishing, catch a nice trout, have it for lunch, super fresh after cooking it up in a Dutch oven. Good stuff, but killing an elk or a deer with a rifle, they're just trying to eat or something. They're just trying to eat or sometimes get lucky," he shrugged.
"But you killed those creatures back in the station when we were trapped by the space clown." "The what?" Sergeant Sampson asked.
Dude, worst species ever. It's all these freaky fecking space clowns. They can float around and move really fast, and have razor-sharp claws and teeth and a third eye in their forehead. Whoa, slow down. There's a species that dresses up like clowns. No, that's how they look. Giant feet, fat bodies, red noses, white, creepy faces. They try to sacrifice innocent people to appease some creepy-ass space clown god. Well, feck that, Cal muttered. Think we'll have to fight them in the war? No. Think we'll... No. Everyone in the galaxy apparently hates them, Billy Bob said. Well, look at that. Universal constant. Everyone hates clowns, Sergeant Sampson said with a nod. Emily finally spoke up again. Okay, but if you all hate them, why do you have them? But if you all hate them, why do you have them? The humans are quiet as she looked around. Can any of you explain why they still exist amongst your species if all of you hate them so much? Huh? She looked around as they were still quiet. Finally, Billy Bob spoke up. I bet it's the Europeans' fault. Yeah, Samson and Cal said with a nod before Billy Bob continued. The French probably figure that The French probably figure if we get rid of clowns, mimes are next. So they protect them, somehow, behind the scenes, because we'd all rather have mimes than clowns. But if there was no clowns, we'd beat mimes too. Yeah, that sounds reasonable, Cal said with a nod. No, it's not the Europeans, Captain Crunch said firmly. I don't know why we still have them. They creeped me out as a kid, and I've never hired them, but someone still does, so I don't know. Well, anyway, those animals were trying to kill us. I squished those headless Ewoks because they were creepy, Cal frowned, and... Well, anyway, those animals were trying to kill us. I squished those headless Ewoks because they were creepy. Cal frowned and arched a brow as she heard him say headless Ewoks. But I felt bad for the Pogra. But I felt bad for the Pogra, because killing an animal clean and cutting its tendons and hearing it scream is way different. Like if you go to squish a spider, because it startled you. But when you have it in the ball of toilet paper and you squeeze it and you both hear the that scrub. But when you have it in a ball of toilet paper and you squeeze and you both hear and feel the pop. The archangels all groaned as he said that. Yeah, you know that pop. Please don't talk about stuff like that, Carl said. Most bugs just sort of smear, and it's no issue. But every so often, she shuddered, as goosebumps rose on her skin, obviously reliving that experience in her head. Okay, we need to stop talking about this stuff, Captain Crunch said. I know. It gets us nowhere. He was the one that started it all, Emily said, pointing at Billy Bob. Oh, right, what did I originally ask? You asked how I was, and then I went off. You asked how I was, and then went off hunting. You asked how I was, and then went off on hunting. Just saying that I couldn't do it myself. Billy Bob. Right. Well, you seem okay. You were amazing in that power suit. Did I say that? I kind of forgot. You're good. The archangels are good. We're all good. Yes, but I think they may not be... The call sign you have decided on is no longer available. Please try again or hang up. I suppose there's so many, not everybody can have a unique call sign. All good. And you don't want two people with the same call sign. I'd imagine it gets pretty difficult. All good. Yes, but I think they might be those meatheads you talked about before. When they leave their armor at night, they look all muscular and bulky. The archangels looked at Billy Bob, who looked at them, and then back at Emily, looking confused and unsure. What are we talking about? What are we talking about here?
When you were first talking about humans and how your food deposit is natural. She poked his gut, and he laughed for a moment at the sensation. Then he had to think back on those early conversations. Oh, how this is normal and healthy, and that some humans have a disease with meat in their brains, so they work out way too much. He could feel the eyes of the archangels boring into him. Yeah, I lied. They're way healthier than I am. I'm fine, but it's not like I'm a prime example of human physique. I got a bit of a beer gut, but I'm strong. I am on the blue-collar workout routine after all. Wait, you're not in top physical shape? Hell no! She stared at him for a moment, obviously a little confused, but you're fighting, and running, and strength. You beat up those borks, and fought for hours without rest. Yeah, I'm a little stronger than your average human, but that's about it. I'm slower than most, too. I'm pretty normal. He pointed to the archangels. They're the humans in top physical form, plus, power armor. So, you're normal. You're average. I wouldn't say average. I'm a good pilot after all, but like ground combat, average. Better in a brawl than most, though. I'm a good 6'3". I'm a good 6'3", which is tall for my people, so I have reach. But yeah, like running and shooting, totally average. She stared at him then before looking at the archangels. Is he serious? Yes, sir, Carl said with a nod. He's tougher than he gives himself credit, but the real top combatants are us. Of course, we are the absolute best that humanity has to offer. The others nodded at that. Okay, Emily said, and then crossed all four of her arms. Okay. Others nodded at that. Okay, Emily said, and then crossed all of her arms. If you're all so tough, how come we've been hiding on this planet for 2 days? Well, while we're excellent face-to-face soldiers, getting shot out of the sky still happens to kill us. Not to mention that great soldiers can be killed by shitty soldiers if there's a fact ton of them, Sergeant Sampson blurted out before Captain Crunch waved a hand. It's a bit more complicated than that. We needed to wait until our cruiser had a better fix on our position, and the crab ships left orbit. Sergeant White and Ivanovich should be back from scouting soon. The issue is that they have a lot of AA in the area, and we're unsure what their fighter complement is in the area. Getting your Longhorn off this rock isn't going to be easy. Well, how did you guys get to the forest? You guys might have been paying attention, but I happened to sleep through that part, Billy Bob mentioned. We flew low. So long as we stay under 2,000 feet, they can't pick us up on the big sensors from what we've seen. They are sending local craft around, but they suck at searching forests. We're thinking we might be here for a month or so. Go around, pick off sensor stations and AA platforms, and then hoping they don't have any fighters around. We go around, picking off sensor stations and AA platforms, and then hoping they don't have any fighters around when we head to space. A month! Billy Bob gasped, and Emily did as well, before she continued. We can't wait that long. We have to get to the council capital during the big meeting so that I can show them the suppression device. The Archangel stared. These council arseholes have been making other species stupid thanks to some sort of big control device that works through the FTL lanes and transponder updates. The council arseholes have been making other species stupid thanks to some sort of big control device that works through the FTL lanes and translator updates. They've been making the other species easier to control and more likely to go along with their plans. So, if we expose them, then we might not be at war with the entire rest of the galaxy, Captain Crunch asked. Yeah, just the council races in charge. The crabs and those space poodles, the fish cops and some space hamsters I haven't met yet. The captain was quiet for a moment. I suppose that's still enough of a challenge, but fighting the entire galaxy would make for an ultimate test of humanity. The others nodded at that, adding their agreement. What? You actually want to fight the rest of the... What? What? You actually want to fight the rest of the galaxy? Emily gasped out.
Well, it would prove once and for all that we're the best,
Billy Bob said with a nod.
But the UHG would be mad at us forever.
Oh, yes, that's true, Carl said with a nod. I mean, if it wasn't our fault, they might get over it. But if they found out that we had a chance to limit the war, yeah.
All right, then that's... All right. All right, well, that's even if we can get off this damn planet,
Captain Crunch reminded them.
Up-dooty-doot. Up-dooty-doot.
Captain Crunch reminded them.
Billy Bob thought for a moment. Hey, there were plenty of cargo ships traveling on and off the planet. Why not take one?
What do you mean? Zego cargo.
What do you mean? Xeno cargo ships are massive. You know that. And without the proper codes, they'd figure it out while we were leaving orbit. Yeah, but I mean, I can fly an Atlas. I saw their command set up once. These idiots spread out all the jobs so everyone has something to do. But I could do it.
You could pilot an Atlas on your own. Those things have command crews of like 10.
Hey, I told you guys, I'm a good pilot. Well, a good cargo pilot. We'll hit a spaceport, fly my Longhorn into an Atlas, take it over, and then get the feck out of here. If they start shooting at it, it's a fecking Atlas. They have a lot to shoot. We'll just bail in my Longhorn should things get bad. We'll just bail in my Longhorn should things get that bad. We'll just bail in my Longhorn should things get bad enough.
Captain Crunch was silent at that for a moment. It's a better plan than anything we've got. I'll contact White and Ivan. Cull, Samson, you start breaking down our camp. I want to see if we can move out tonight. As they started to split up and work, Billy Bob was left alone with Emily. Looking over at her, he thought about what they told him.
I heard you told them to be careful about my neck. Maybe you should try not being so rough with it.
She smirked at that under her mask. Yeah, but I'm starting to think that I am the badass here. You got beat up and had your arm cut off while I did just fine.
Oh, that giant metal power suit had nothing to do with it, huh? Mischarged straight into a bunch of matter slabbers.
I totally could have taken them on my own. I dragged your sorry ass to safety, didn't I? She slowly leaned over to give him another hug, resting a muzzle on top of his head. He still wasn't sure he liked being the short one. It felt weird.
I can see why humans like hugs. They're warm.
I can see why humans like hugs. They're warm, she murmured softly.
Yeah, well, don't expect me to let you tear my throat out with your teeth again.
He had an arm around her as he carefully avoided crushing her wings.
But I'm glad you decided to save my arm, and me at the same time.
How could I give you a double high fives if you lost it? Came out of a reply. How could I give you double high fives if you lost it? Came her reply. He took a slow breath of the forest air and thought it over. Maybe the archangels were right about Emily, but that would have to wait until they were off this planet, and then for him to fully recover, so that he didn't want her getting too comfy too fast. She felt him shift a little, and then her eyes opened after she heard the noise.
Did you just... Sorry, I'm still sore and tired. I just kind of slipped out.
She quickly moved away from him. Billy Bob!
Hey, humans fought. You're going to have to accept that.
At least I can fly away from you out here.
I swear to God it's not that bad. You're exaggerating.
As she flew up into the treetops to help them scout, he shrugged and began to limp back to his ship. Good thing she didn't realize that he could make that noise with one hand and an armpit. And so ends another chapter in the adventures of Billy Bob Space Trucker.
Okie dokie. I know I haven't done as much as some of the other days, although the first chapter was pretty long, so we've done 13,000 words. But my voice isn't in tip-top shape today. So I think that's going to be it for the day. Don't want to push it too far, because then tomorrow I can't work. Okie dokie. Thank you everyone for joining me. It's very much appreciated, especially in this day and age where attention is pulled in every which direction. You guys spending your time with me is very much appreciated. I'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. I hope you all have a good one. Cheers.